Góðan daginn. Good morning. So this talk is dedicated to the migrating birds I spent last weekend in the north of Iceland admiring. At this time of year, hundreds of them gather in massive and extremely noisy flocks. They need to be very, very loud to be heard. In areas with rich food sources before they leave Iceland, they exhibit restlessness and wander in short flights, which will strengthen their wings, sending each other flight and contact calls before they embark on their journey. Their combined energy and organizing is critical to the long-distance flights. There are few things that demonstrate better than this wildlife spectacle that solidarity is the key to collective commitment. As a movement, Me Too inscribes itself into the political and historical present as the realization of a cozy, poetical impossibility, where the desire for a global change, both broad and deep, is being expressed. The hashtag itself echoes a larger whole beyond the individual. It is an I with countless others, a we of solidarity and shared experience, allowing women across social, ethnic, political, and sexual divides to understand that they are not alone and what happens to one is also happening to others. The term we should not be confused with some assumed unified women's identity that returns by demolishing all differences and the multiple voices that prepare the grounds for what can be a transformative change. Instead, the we needs to engage with and be affected by the fact that the space created by Me Too has not yet provided the security or the support for all women to voice their stories. This applies especially to the groups of women facing multiple discrimination and oppression on the basis of class, race, or disability. One way of describing the Me Too movement is to frame it in terms of an archive of lived counter-memories. It goes against what is deemed to matter in hegemonic historical narratives, highlighting its exclusions. It is a call for resistance. For writer and scholar Ellen Sixou, this is also what the act of writing is. It is an injunction to remember. As he put it, to write is, or should be, to remember what might disappear, what might be banned, killed, despised, faraway things, women, nomadic people. Sixou called for a feminist revolution through writing, which would allow women who have never been at ease in the world as it is, to put themselves into the text, as into the world and into history. I think Me Too may be the closest to reflecting a revolution of this sort. Its manifestations at this particular time can be a turning point, which has the potential of affecting a paradigmatic change by offering a new understanding of and approach toward the battle against sexual violence in general. The French historian Georges Vicarello has framed this in the following manner. Me Too marks a shift from a condition whereby the intolerable is accepted to that of refusing to leave the intolerable untouched. The novelty of Me Too lies in its unequaled breadth and levels of social participation and its instantaneous mediatized impact. This is not to say that a consensus has been built around Me Too. It has encountered criticism from within for not being inclusive enough. And it faces continued hostility by reactionary political forces. Yet, since it burst onto the scene, one can detect far more public empathy and compassion for those victimized by predatory sexual practices. But when judging the results of Me Too, there are no comparable historical examples of social recognition and awareness. It has provided the gender equality struggle with a political momentum, which, if sustained, can have a lasting impact on common conceptions of sex, gender, and gender identity, equal to or perhaps even greater than the changes in laws and attitudes achieved by previous waves of women's rights movements. The movement can be seen as a reaction to a system constructed in a way that offers no other option than to fail those who have been subject to sexual harassment and violence. One of its greatest strengths is that it took the only available path by focusing on the social malignancy as such. As political theorist Judith Clark pointed out, victims of sexual violence have had to suffer public cruelty, which is the deliberate infliction of pain upon a weaker person or group by stronger ones in order to achieve an end. Perhaps one can say that Me Too staged its own trial over a system where impunity prevails. A venue was created where the victims could tell their story, a right they had been denied in the House of Justice or the legal system or through other judicial processes. This allowed them to express their anger and grief with their own words and be heard. Female suffering and mourning, seen as an overflow of emotions, actually have been portrayed as a threat to the city-state since the ancient Greeks. With Me Too, victims of sexual violence have acquired the power of interpretation, or the survivor's absolute right to speak up or not to speak up in her own voice and on her own terms. In this context, therefore, it can be called historic. Me Too must be grounded in the ongoing history of women in revolt in both national and transnational contexts, as well as understood as part of a global uprising and recomposition of women's struggles. Its unprecedented spatial reach goes hand in hand with the need in women's movements and feminist scholarships to take a more radical stance, to adopt intersectional perspective, global south, post-colonial, anti-racist, queer, and ecological perspectives at the expense of narrow, neoliberal, capitalist, market-oriented, and culturalist vision of equality. Despite its global impact, Me Too has spread unevenly. It took Western Europe and North America by storm, as we all know. In the Nordic countries, praised for their gender equality, it revealed that the problem runs as deep as everywhere else. In Arab countries, those women wielding social influence and those in powerful positions have mostly remained silent, while thousands of women at the grassroots level have responded to it. In the Balkans, the impact has been minimal, reflecting a political situation characterized by nationalist authoritarian politics, which has severely weakened social groups and NGOs. In Australia, a few well-timed lawsuits against women who spoke out scotched the movement in its infancy. In India, where sexual violence can be seen as a pandemic, Me Too turned out to be an important tool to combat the problem, although this did not happen until late 2018, and the me in the phrase still only applies to women who belong to the country's educated middle and upper classes. This is not to say that all these countries do not and have not had their own histories of feminist resistances and grassroots hashtag movements similar to Me Too. The magnitude of feminist mobilizations in countries such as Spain, India, Chile, and Argentina are unparalleled and can be seen as having been given a boost by the Me Too movement. In some cases, the national movements have been overwhelmed by the more global Me Too hashtag, as has to some degree been the case in South Africa, but in many others, they have gained new impetus. For instance, in this summer in Russia, where Me Too had not taken off, feminists launched the hashtag I didn't want to die, encouraging women to speak up. There is no such thing as an automatic or self-sustained momentum when faced with a patriarchal system that continually finds new ways of reproducing itself and resisting change. 2 years after Me Too, the situation in many countries shows that the issue of sexual rights and sexuality is a battlefront. Sexual and sexist violence continues to be sidelined by the courts. In Trump's America, law restricting access to abortion have been adopted in a number of states, especially in the South. The right to abortion is also regularly attacked in some European countries. The Polish government has been particularly active, proposing a string of anti-abortion legislative bills, which have been countered by a massive mobilization of Polish women. Similarly, the Hungarian, Austrian, and Italian governments wave the scarecrow of declining demographics to justify retrograde positions on sexual and reproductive rights. One way to maintain the momentum of Me Too may be to think of it in terms of a new beginning. Such reframing echoes Virginia Woolf's famous words from another era, or when she declared that in or about December 1910, human character changed. She was, of course, mocking the arbitrariness of the exact dating of long-term processes practiced by traditional historiography. But more importantly, she was seeing its subversive potential and registering her engagement with exploring the specificity of her times. She noted that in this specific year, dramatic changes occurred in people's relations with each other, in the physical environment, in government, in entertainment, movement, and sensory perceptions. Memory and experience were affected by these changes, and so were the terms on which human subjectivity was premised and conceptualized. Through systemic denunciation of patriarchy and conservative politics, Woolf developed an alternative historiography, which would overcome the silencing effects of the traditional historical narratives and do justice to the oppressed and the defeated, mainly women and other outsiders to authority. With a view to understanding and revolutioning the present, this rescribing of the past is an attempt to intervene, to reactivate unfulfilled or lost potentialities. In other words, we need to find the conditions for justice in the past for the impossible to become possible in the future, or to practice what has been termed revolutionary nostalgia. This is the promise of the Me Too movement, which needs to be sustained by a clear focus on structural societal changes and through solidarities across multiple axes of differences and national boundaries. At the same time, we need to pay close attention to the absolute singularity of each and every life. I want to close my talk with a few lines from a poem in my translation by an Icelandic poet, Gerður Kristný, from a recent book, Requiem. which contains a powerful injunction to remember. In it, she recounts the suffering of a woman who in real life had been abused in her childhood by her older brother and later as a prostitute, and who took her own life after having told her story. Indeed, you were daughter of man who was sacrificed. Your story is disclosed so that whoever believes in it shall not perish. Honor the daughter you judges on earth. Thank you.